That sun rose heavy over the backlands of Aruna, painting the cracked earth red, smelling of dust and sweat. It was one of those days when the wind seemed tired, dragging along the distant sound of cicadas and the murmuring of people who had already stopped dreaming. It was in that setting that Maria's destiny began to break apart. She was only 17, her face still carrying the innocence of childhood, mixed with the fear of someone who already knew hunger. Her father, old Giustino, owed more than he could ever pay. He owed the most powerful landowner in the region, Colonel Evaristo Montebello, a man with large hands and a small heart, owner of land, cattle, and people. When the colonel appeared at the door of their small mud and straw house, silence filled the place. He didn't need to speak loudly. His gaze was enough. He sat down, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a white handkerchief, and said, "Giustino, your time is up. Either you pay the debt, or the land changes hands." The old man lowered his head. He had no answer. The harvest had been lost to the drought, the cattle had died of thirst, and hope had been buried along with them. "I have a daughter," he murmured, his voice trembling. The colonel raised an eyebrow. "What are you saying?" "Maria. She can work on the farm, take care of the house, serve in the kitchen. You forgive the debt, and—" "Take her." Maria, who was listening from the doorway, felt her body go cold. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Her mother sobbed quietly, her face hidden in her hands. The colonel stood slowly, looked at the old man, then at the girl. "How old is she?" 17. A crooked smile formed at the corner of his mouth. "The land is mine. And now the girl is too." That night the wind blew cold. Maria was taken away in a cart without looking back. Her father didn't have the courage to say goodbye. Her mother ran after her, screaming her name, but the dust raised by the wheels swallowed her voice. The Montebello Ranch was a place of silence. Surrounded by barbed wire fences and vast dry fields, it looked more like punishment than home. The walls of the main house were painted white, but inside everything smelled of mold and loneliness. The colonel had lived alone since his wife had died in childbirth nearly 20 years before. They said he never looked at another woman without seeing a ghost. Maria was left in the kitchen. An old servant woman, Philo, handed her a bucket and a rag. "Wash the floor and don't make a sound. The master doesn't like noise," and so began the routine that the backlands reserved for women with no choice. Days became weeks. The sun burned her skin, the dust got in her eyes, and the nights brought only the sound of crickets and fear. Maria didn't speak, only obeyed. But inside her, a silent fire grew. There was anger, sadness, and one question that consumed her. Why did the colonel never touch her? He watched her from afar, always silent, always with that heavy gaze. Sometimes he left a plate of food on the table before heading to the fields. Other times he sat for hours on the veranda, staring at the horizon as if waiting for someone to return. One night, old Philo came into her room with a strange look. "The master wants to see you in the big room." Maria froze. Her heart raced. She thought of running, but where could she go? The backlands are not kind to a woman alone. She walked slowly down the wooden hallway, the floor creaking beneath her steps. When she arrived, the colonel stood holding a glass of kashaka sit. She obeyed. He was silent for a long while, then said, "Do you know why I accepted your father's deal?" Maria shook her head. "Because you have the eyes of my wife." Silence fell heavy. He downed the drink in one gulp. "She died here in this house. Tried to give me a son. God took them both. Since then, nothing has grown on this land." Maria didn't know what to say. "And why did you bring me here, Colonel?" He looked at her with a tired sadness. "Because the wind told me it was time to pay what I owed. In the days that followed, something changed. The colonel began treating her with respect. He gave her a separate room, new clothes, even an old book he'd kept since the days when he still believed in God. Maria began to see in him something unexpected, guilt, but the village doesn't forgive what it doesn't understand. Soon the whispers began. The colonel's gone mad. The girl bewitched him. This won't end well. The servants gossiped. Father Bento refused to visit, and old Philo prayed every night, afraid of divine punishment. One afternoon, while sweeping the yard, Maria heard a different sound, the gallop of a horse. The animal stopped at the gate, and a man dismounted. Tall, dark-skinned, unshaven, with a familiar look. Maria? She froze. It was Elias, the boy she'd grown up with in the village, the one who once promised to come back for her. What are you doing here? She didn't answer. The colonel appeared behind her, his face dark. Who's this? Elias took a step forward. Man come to claim what's rightfully his. A silence exploded like thunder. Maria looked from the colonel to Elias. The colonel clenched his fist. She's not yours anymore. Elias smirked. You may have bought her father's land, Colonel, but you can't buy her heart. The wind began to blow hard, lifting the dust. The tension sliced the air. Maria's heart pounded so loud it echoed inside her chest. The colonel looked at her and said quietly, "Speak, girl. Do you want to go with him?" She was mute. She looked at the dry horizon, her calloused hands, the ground she had cleaned with her tears. "I want to be free." The words came weak, but they were enough. The colonel closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "Then go." Elias held out his hand. Maria hesitated for a moment, but the colonel's tired, defeated gaze made her decide. She climbed onto the horse and rode away, without looking back. But the backlands are not a place for easy endings. Halfway down the road, the sound of a gunshot echoed. And fate changed course once again. The gunshot echoed through the backlands, as if time itself had stopped to listen. The horse reared. Maria almost fell, and Elias yanked the reins hard. The sound came from behind, from the direction of the ranch. Her heart pounded. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder and burnt dust. She looked toward the horizon and saw a thin column of smoke rising. Elias cursed under his breath. Damn old man. What did he do, Elias? She asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, but we need to leave. Now. They galloped down the dirt road. The sun was setting, but the heat still burned their skin. Maria held tight to the saddle, her face covered with a scarf. She didn't know if she was crying from fear or guilt. With every hoofbeat, the wind seemed to repeat the colonel's words. The wind told me it was time to pay what I owed. When they finally stopped, it was night. They camped near a nearly dry stream. Elias lit a fire, and Maria sat in silence, watching the flames dance. You should have waited for me, Maria, he said, his voice tight with anger. I waited. 4 years? And then you sold your love to pay your father's debt? She looked up, wounded. You don't understand. I had no choice, he scoffed, throwing a log into the fire. There's always a choice. Not in the backlands. Here, even love has an owner. Silence again. The crackle of the fire and the distant call of a curio bird were the only witnesses to their conversation. Elias looked at her, his face hard. Why did the old man let you go? Because I asked. Evaristo Montebello never did anything for free. Maria sighed. He said he was paying what he owed. Elias frowned. Owed to whom? Maybe to God. The man laughed bitterly. The colonel and God don't know each other. Maria stared into the fire until her eyes burned. The image of the colonel sitting on the veranda, that lost look, wouldn't leave her mind. Something told her the shot wasn't meant for them. Something had happened there. The next day, They returned to the village. Dust covered everything. When they passed the tavern, people stared silently, whispering to each other. Father Bento came out of the church and made the sign of the cross. The colonel's dead. Maria's legs gave way. How? Found him on the veranda, gun in hand. A shot to the chest. The priest sighed. They say it was suicide. Elias looked down, speechless. Maria stood still, a lump rising in her throat. I need to see him. They went to the Montebello ranch. The servants were quiet, the body already covered with a white sheet. Old Philo cried in the corner, muttering prayers. Maria knelt beside the body and lifted the cloth. The colonel's face looked peaceful, as if all the years of weight had finally lifted. In his hands there was a letter. The priest handed it to her. Found it with him. It has your name. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The handwriting was firm, marked by the pain of someone writing at the end of life. Maria, the wind didn't lie. I owed more than I could pay. I brought you into this house thinking I was buying peace, but I bought a mirror for my sin. You reminded me of the woman I lost, and with her, everything I buried. I never touched you because I couldn't stain what destiny sent to cleanse me. In the old room, there's a box. Inside it is what's left of my soul. Forgive an old man who learned too late that guilt can't be erased with power. Evaristo. Maria let the letter fall to the floor. The priest closed his eyes. Elias stared at her, confused. What did he mean? That the backlands still collect debts from those who try to fool time. They went to the old room. Under the bed, they found a dark wooden box covered in dust. Maria opened it slowly. Inside was a silver crucifix, an old photograph, and a faded blue ribbon. It's his wife's, said Elias. No, Maria whispered. It's my mother's. The shock sliced through the air. Elias stepped back. What are you saying? My mother worked here before I was born. She said she fled because the master was cruel. But she never told me his name? You mean the colonel? Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. He was my father. The wind blew through the window, as if confirming the secret. Elias was speechless. Everyone in the village had believed the colonel was a monster, but no one knew he carried the greatest sin of all, abandoning his own daughter. Maria stumbled out of the house. The words of the letter echoed in her mind. I brought you into this house, thinking I was buying peace. Now she understood. And what had once been anger became a hollow emptiness. In the days that followed, the news spread like fire through dry grass. The people invented versions, the priests said masses, and old Philo swore the colonel killed himself because he saw an angel in Maria's face. Elias tried to convince her to leave the village. There's only pain here, Maria. Let's start over somewhere else. But she shook her head. The backlands gave me pain, but they also gave me the wind. And the wind still has something to say. One morning, she went down to the creek where she used to wash the ranch's clothes. She sat by the water and opened the letter again. Her tears fell silently, mixing with the dust. In the distance, she saw a boy playing, about 10 years old, barefoot, with a crooked straw hat. He waved at her and ran off. Who are you, boy? She called, but he vanished into the brush. On the ground where he had stood was a small white stone, and beneath it, another folded piece of paper. Maria opened it. The handwriting was familiar, shaky. Daughter, if the wind brings you here, know that I heard you. The love the backlands took from me, God returned in your eyes. She wept until the earth seemed to soak up her tears. The creek flowed slowly, carrying away the last remnants of the past. That night, the wind blew hard over Montebello. The house, now empty, seemed to breathe in relief. And in the darkness, Maria understood that sometimes forgiveness doesn't come to those who ask, but to those who have the courage to stay. Elias stood beside her, silent. You're really staying here alone? he asked. She smiled faintly. The backlands made me the daughter of the wind, and the wind never leaves anyone alone. Time passed, and the ranch was reborn. The once barren land bore fruit, the waters returned to flow, and the birds that had fled with the gunshot came back to sing. The people said it was a miracle. Father Bento said it was divine justice. But Maria knew it was the wind keeping its promise. The wind takes what must go, she said, looking at the horizon, but always brings back what still has forgiveness. The months dragged on like chains. Maria learned to live between the silence of the empty house and the constant whisper of the wind at the windows. Sometimes she woke in the night, swearing she heard footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the old chair on the veranda, or the sound of a cup being set on the table, the same sounds the colonel made each morning. At first, it scared her. Later, she understood it wasn't haunting. It was memory. And the backlands have a way of keeping memories tucked in corners, unsure whether to forget or keep praying. Elias stayed there, working the land, tending the animals, helping Maria keep the ranch alive. The villagers slowly started coming back. Some brought supplies, others just came to see the woman the wind spared. She never told the full story, only said the colonel had gone and left the wind to watch over her. One afternoon, the sky darkened. Heavy clouds rolled in from the north, full of thunder and promise. Elias looked to the horizon and said, "Heavy rain's coming." Maria smiled. The backlands will breathe again. When the rain came, it was as if the whole world cried with her. Water poured down the roofs, down the furrows of the earth, and down Maria's face, standing in the yard with open arms, letting time wash away all that still hurt. Elias ran to her, but she didn't move. "Let it, Elias." The wind brought what it had to. Now it's the rain's turn. The next morning, the sun returned strong, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. Green began to sprout timidly along the roadsides. The hens pecked, the cattle mooed, and the birds sang again. Montebello was no longer a sad house. It was a place of rebirth. Even so, the past still appeared sometimes like a shadow. One day, while cleaning the colonel's old room, Maria found another letter hidden behind a picture frame. The paper was yellowed, the ink nearly gone. She read it slowly, her heart tight. "Maria, if one day you find this letter, know that I prayed for the wind to bring you forgiveness. I lived my whole life believing I could command fate, but I learned too late that fate only obeys the wind. Take care of the land. It still carries your name, Evaristo." The tears returned, but now they were different. They didn't hurt anymore. They flowed like clean water, washing away what pain time couldn't. She placed the letter in a box, along with the blue ribbon and the crucifix. The following weeks were filled with hard work. Elias tended the fields, and Maria organized what was left of the staff. The village began calling the ranch the Land of Hope. One day, Father Bento visited and said, "I used to think the wind brought misfortune, but I've learned it only brings what's needed." Maria replied, "The wind is like God, Father. We don't understand it, but we feel it." With time, Elias and Maria became inseparable. They didn't speak of love, but their silence said everything. At night, they sat on the veranda, looking at the sky full of stars. The backlands seemed different. The loneliness that once hurt had become company. But fate, which loves to test those who rise, still held one last surprise that one cold June morning. A traveler arrived on a weary horse. He knocked gently on the door and asked, "Is this the old ranch of Colonel Evaristo?" "It is," Maria replied warily. "Who are you?" The man removed his hat, revealing an aged, weary face. "My name is Bentofillo. I came from far away. I found something that belongs to this land." He handed her a small iron box. Maria opened it carefully. Inside was a gold locket engraved with two initials, EM and JM. Where did you find this? She asked, her voice shaking. At an auction of old estates down south. They said it belonged to Colonel Evaristo and his wife, Juliana Montebello. Maria clutched the locket tightly. The letters struck her chest like living memories. Inside the locket was an old photo of a smiling woman holding a baby. "It's my mother," Maria whispered. The traveler continued. There was also a note inside the box. He handed her a folded piece of paper. Maria opened it and read aloud, her voice trembling. "If the wind carries this locket, may it find my daughter. Her name is Maria. May destiny guide her back home." Silence filled the room. Elias rested his hand on her shoulder. The priest, who had come along, wiped tears from his old eyes. "It seems even the dead pray when the wind carries the right name," whispered Father Bento. That night was different. Maria lit a lantern on the veranda, holding the locket between her fingers. The wind blew softly, playing with her hair as if caressing her face. "Now I understand, Mother." The wind always knew the way. After that, life went on quietly, the way the backlands liked. The crops grew, the animals thrived, and Montebello became a shelter for those who had nowhere else to go. Maria welcomed everyone, never asking questions. She would simply say, "Whoever arrives with the wind arrives to stay." The years passed. Elias grew older, his hair turning white, but his eyes remained the same. One afternoon, sitting on the veranda, he asked, "Do you still hear the wind, Maria?" She smiled. "Every day. Sometimes it speaks of longing, sometimes of hope. And what does it say today?" She looked toward the crimson horizon. "That guilt is gone, and forgiveness remains." Elias took her hand. "Then, I think the backlands have finally found peace. The backlands only rest when our hearts learn to be still." Elias, years later, when Maria's hair had turned silver, people began calling her the Woman of the Wind. They said that anyone who passed along the road and listened closely to the wind, through the trees, could smell the scent of wet earth and hear a whisper. Forgiveness is the name the wind gives to love. When she passed away, on a calm September morning, the wind blew differently. Not harshly, but tenderly, as if nature itself was carrying away a story that had fulfilled its destiny. Father Bento, now old and trembling, celebrated the Mass and said softly, "Today, even the wind has knelt down, and they say that ever since that day, when the sun rises over the lands of Montebello, the sound of the wind among the leaves carries an old, gentle song made of memory and gratitude, and those who listen swear they can still hear a woman's voice whispering, 'The wind took the fear and brought back life.'"